Another clarification, which comes up quite often, is does the science of reading say that most of reading instruction should focus on phonics? How many of you out there have heard people say the science of reading is really about phonics? We just need to get more phonics instruction going in our schools. I bet many of you have heard that. However, an accurate statement is that the science of reading is not just about phonics. The reason, and this is really important, the reason why phonics has been central to the science of reading movement is because there has been a long-standing debate over phonics. Phonics is not the most important element. It is an element. But because there's been this debate where people say, oh, we don't need to have phonics instruction, students will learn to read naturally. And I hope I've convinced you that students don't learn to read naturally. They learn to read because we adults and other children work with them in the reading process. However, many teachers, through no fault of their own, are unprepared to teach phonics for reasons that are sometimes difficult for me to fully explain or even understand myself. Many teachers have graduated from programs in which learning what the phonemic elements are, learning how the sounds of our language map to print, learning the morphological features of our language, learning things like diphthongs, digraphs, how they work, has been neglected. No fault of the teachers, but because it has been neglected, it means that they are uncomfortable teaching it. So phonics has gotten this emphasis because it's often neglected, particularly at a time in which we were talking a lot about balanced literacy. How many of you out there were part of a tradition in which balanced literacy is the way we were thinking about literacy instruction? And the original idea about balanced literacy was extremely positive. The original idea is that it would truly be balanced. And that would mean that for students who needed more phonics instruction, they would get it. And for students who needed more phonemic awareness, they would get it. And for students who needed more fluency, they would get it. In other words, how we would balance those critical elements of reading would depend on the needs of the students we were teaching. Uh-oh, what happened? Unfortunately, although, as I'm reading Tammy Larson's comment here, although we have had it for the last 10 years, it ended up not being very balanced. They really had too many teachers that didn't understand what balanced literacy really was. So again, not blaming because we can't do things we haven't been taught. We have learned to reconceptualize balanced literacy as the science of reading, in which we really more fully understand all of those critical elements of reading and how we emphasize them based on the differentiated needs of students. So what we know is that decades of research shows that phonics instruction is necessary for the vast majority of children to learn to read. Yes, it's necessary. But is it sufficient? And the answer is no. Necessary but not sufficient. Phonics isn't the only thing that students need. In the terms of the components of reading instruction, if they learn to read the words, they better also learn vocabulary and background knowledge. Also, phonics should not even be the majority of reading instruction. In the early grades, phonics takes on a bigger component because students are actually trying to learn how to read the words. But once students learn to read the words, what we want to move to is greater emphasis on morphology so students can be generative in their word reading. So we need to be thinking about how phonics, the roles it plays and the role it doesn't play. So I hope that we all are beginning to think about phonics in its proper perspective. Necessary, but not sufficient.